Hello, and welcome to Brokenomics Alien Invasion. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, is that possibly not a slightly off-kilter topic for Brokenomics? And I don't think so, actually, because I've got a number of reasons on this one. Brokenomics is actually as much about broken systems as it is about economics. And one of the angles that I'm going to be coming at on from this one is some of the shenanigans that we've seen from, the Pentagon and the like, where basically I'm going to put forward the conjecture that they are slow rolling us another potential propaganda piece. But actually, this episode is going to be far more about me basically just taking a bit of a fun subject and taking you through a logic process, making an argument, taking you through a logic process using maths and evidence to back it up as I go, and is absolutely fine if you want to disagree on any one of those components that goes into it. Actually, the thing that I'm showcasing here more than anything is the process of making an argument, of following a logical pattern throughout. So by all means, if you think that I've got any of the facts or the propositions or the assumptions wrong at any point, absolutely fine. Stick them down in the comments. I always read the comments. We can get into it there, but it's more about the logical process of following this one through in order to where I get. And the other angle why I'm covering this is because I do want to, on Brokenomics, as I said, it's about broken systems as well, start getting into some of the government psyops that we've seen over the years. I'll touch on these later, things like the USS Liberty, which I'd like to cover, and various other ones. And this is just a nice soft way of getting into that. Now, what prompted me to do it now? Well, two things. First of all, this is the last Brokenomics that I get to film in the old studio, and there's going to be a bit of a delay, so we might be in the new studio by the time you actually see this one. Everything's chaos around here. I can't even get to my desk. It's just got boxes and boxes of Carl's Space Marine stuff on it. So I've decided, sod it. I'm just going to do something fun. This should be good. Right, let's get into it now. And the other thing that prompted me to do it right now was this video that went a bit viral, went around the world, of an apparently a alien spacecraft crashing into the back garden of some poor chap in Las Vegas. Let's watch that now.
The incident has a lot in common with other bizarre cases from around the world: an alleged crash, strange beings, and bits and pieces that don't make sense. But the police took this seriously, and so do we. Just before midnight on April 30th, skywatchers across several western states saw a bright fireball streak through the heavens. A police officer working in the Northwest Valley caught a glimpse of the colorful object on his body cam. At nearly the same time, a Ring camera in the area recorded a strange noise and what sounds like a crash. One family living in a ranch-style home had a much closer view of the object. Two brothers and their father were working on a vehicle in their yard when they caught a glimpse of a sparkly object as it came crashing down, then were hit by what they describe as a shock wave. One of the witnesses, a young man named Angel, has stated when the brothers looked into the yard where the object landed, that spot was obscured and blurry, as if by unknown form of camouflage. What they saw next prompted a frantic call to 911.
So there's two people or two subjects that are in your backyard?
Correct, and they're very large. They're like 8 foot, 9 feet, 10 foot. I don't know. They look like aliens to us. Big eyes. They have big eyes, like I can't explain it. And big mouth. They're shiny eyes, and they're not human. They're 100% they're not human.
8 News Now investigators have spoken with family members multiple times in the past 4 weeks, but each of the 3 times we accepted their invitation to do an interview, they didn't answer the door or their phone. These are some of the claims they've made in other public forums. Multiple family members backed up the story in an initial police report we obtained. Angel says they heard the patter of multiple feet in the yard. They later heard footsteps on their roof. They saw one of the 8-foot-tall creatures climb behind the controls of a large front loader stored in the yard as if trying to engage it. He got a good look at one of the creatures, he said, a greenish-grayish being with large eyes and long legs.
Okay, so, interesting that. The proposition that we're kind of being given on that one is that we've got these advanced aliens who have the capacity for interstellar flight, an engineering feat which is centuries ahead of where we are now. So they possess the technological requirements to traverse the stars. And, they've come presumably absolutely belting it in from the interstellar void. And of course, you can't just, let's say we're traveling at, 70% the speed of light. You can't just go straight to Vegas, with that, because if you've got even a relatively small spacecraft, say the size of a double-decker bus, and you hit the planet at 70% the speed of light, you would see the explosion quite visibly from the moon. It would be enormous. So you've got to slow down. So what we're being led to believe in this particular case is this chap, he's absolutely bombing it in, and then presumably around about the orbit of Jupiter, he really slaps on the anchors. He's really got to slow down before he gets to Earth, and he manages it, but only just. And he ends up knocking over somebody's fence in Nevada. Gets out, wanders around. He's a bit stunned because obviously he's landed quite badly. He then gets up and tries to jerry rig a front loader. Presumably to make it down to the main strip or something. Now you might be thinking, okay, well, that's don't take that one too seriously, Dan. And that's just another alien sighting in the US, and the US, they're a bit weird. Just ignore that. But the thing is, it's not just that caliber of that caliber of case that we're seeing anymore. This is getting institutional backing now. So the Pentagon, for at least a couple of years now, has been doing this constant drip of UFO releases. They've been putting out things like what they call it, the Tic Tac alien sighting. They've been putting up stories of pilots who have seen something that they can't explain. They've been declassifying stuff, and they've done multiple interviews at this point saying that yes, there is stuff that they can't explain, and we've been visited, and all of these things. This is all coming out on official channels. And then you've got the other tier, which is the supposed, well, they are former Navy pilots who, and this isn't on a haven't got the institutional backing, but it's one step removed. They're coming forward and they're saying that they've seen things, and they're giving interviews and so on. Even NASA have got in on the case. They recently convened a panel where they discussed a whole number of UFO sightings. Let's watch a clip from that now to get a flavour of the sort of things that the institutions are now talking about quite openly in public. Watch this.
Meanwhile, for the few objects that do demonstrate potentially anomalous characteristics, AARO is approaching these cases with the highest level of objectivity and analytic rigor. This includes physical testing and employing modeling and simulation to validate our analyses and the underlying theories, and then peer reviewing those results before reaching any conclusions. This is an example of one that I showed at the hearing recently. This is a spherical orb, metallic, in the Middle East, 2022, by an MQ-9. I will come back to the sensor question that David raised here in a moment. This is a typical example of the thing that we see most of. We see these all over the world, and we see these in making very interesting apparent maneuvers. This one in particular, however, I would point out, demonstrated no enigmatic technical capabilities and was no threat to airborne safety. While we are still looking at it, I don't have any more data other than that.
Yeah, so there you go. Mysterious indeed. Although, as the NASA guy points out, that flying thing, whatever it was, it didn't display any truly remarkable, properties in terms of acceleration or maneuvering or anything like that. And at this point, I want to throw in the first of my reference videos. So this is a video called a fake alien invasion. It's a sort of half-hour long video. Basically, this guy had something to say. He turned up on YouTube. He made one video about a year ago, and then he disappeared and has never made anything again. But it was a good video, and he lays out the case quite persuasively on this. So I think that's worth watching as a frame of reference for the argument that I'm going to be making in this. And it's very interesting, actually, because there were two very interesting things that he brings forward in that video. One is that he basically demonstrates the progression of what these sightings look like over a period of time. And he makes the connection that basically the things that pilots have claimed to have seen that they could not identify, about 10 years later, it looks like the US military will then go on to release a new plane type which fits that broad sort of shape. Or they declassify because they've had a project in development which they have basically decided to scrap, and therefore the funding is lost and the program gets declassified. And in many such cases, the general profile of what it is they were working on happens to be what 10 years earlier a lot of people were seeing in the skies but unable to identify. Because look, even if you are a Navy pilot, you're not going to get clued in on all of the test flights and the data and so on. So that is a very interesting thread, and he tracks the process of each of these. The other thing that's very interesting is he shows a whole selection of global leaders talking about the prospect of an alien incursion, and they talk about it in terms of, well, it would be a good thing. Because what it would do is it would make us put aside all our differences, stop fighting between us, and we would come to be unified. Let's watch a quick segment from it now of Bill Clinton making that point.
They weren't threatening the planetary existence. I would hope for their existence, because I think it might wake us all up and grow everybody up and stop focusing so much on our differences and figuring out what we can do together.
Yeah, maybe somebody's figured it out.
Okay, so I mean that's just Bill Clinton there, but there's a whole bunch of other ones in it, and you can see the advantages to a government if we were to be all persuaded of something that isn't necessarily happening. So let's touch on that. Let's touch on the psyop angle, because there have been many. There have been many in history, particularly during periods of war. There have been multiple psychological operations carried out on the population. The ones that were conducted during war, you can read entire books on them. There are documentaries made about these psychological operations. There are others which are a lot more controversial, which actually I would like to touch on at some point. And I'm thinking on here of topics like the sinking of the Lusitania, which was very useful for getting the US to enter the First World War. I'm also thinking of more controversially, because it's a much more recent one, which was the sinking of the USS Liberty. Well, it eventually sunk. It took some doing. I think it finally made it to its dock. I would like to do a broconomics on that one. That one's going to be a touchy subject because of the particular government that was involved in it. So I want to make clear that I'm not going after the sort of ethnic group that sits behind that government. My point in broconomics is much more about governments. I have a problem with governments as a whole, not any particular one. But that was a case of where a US battleship came under significant and sustained attack from a US ally, to the point where it was very, very clear that not only did the attacker understand that they were attacking a US ship, but they were very determined to sink it. And it was only after that ship was able to get word out to the rest of the US fleet and make it clear that they were under attack and who was attacking them, that the attack was broken off. And most of the crew died in that sustained attack, but enough of them got out, and they have been talking about it. And recently, this is one that the Jollick Willick, what's his name? Willick, the former Navy SEAL guy. He's been getting these guys on. Josh Willick, I think it is. Yeah, and he's been talking about the survivors of the USS Liberty. So that's something that I want to come back to. But I kind of want to get all my ducks in a row with that one, because it is like I said, the government behind it will lead people to think that you're making a point that you're not actually making when you cover that one. And of course, there was a number of other psyops that we are subjected to. Fairly obviously, global warming, for example. I would hope I'm not losing too many viewers from Brokenomics if I make the completely obvious case that the global warming narrative that we are given is a massive grift. And look, I used to be in finance. I used to have people coming to me all the time saying, yes, you should invest in this. in this scheme is brilliant. We get all of these subsidies, and the taxpayers are going to be channeling us profits for years. You only need to have a decent memory on this, and I've got some sympathy for younger people who buy into this stuff. But look, I mean, I remember when I was a younger man, there was a documentary called An Inconvenient Truth that came out by Al Gore, and he made a whole series of predictions in this, and all of the predictions are wrong. And that's always the case. If you go back and look at old PC, is it, or IPCC, whatever, the International Panel on Climate Change. If you go back and look at any of their older documents, all the predictions they make all turn out to be wrong. It's all based on models. It's all based on essentially the premise that you need to hand over more taxation and freedom to the government. So that I would cite as an example of a massive and ongoing psychological operation, although perhaps some of you would disagree with me on that one. And of course, COVID-19. I'm very much hoping to have Laura Dobsworth come on Brokenomics in the not too distant future, and she has written books on the psychological operation that was carried out against the British public over the lockdown periods, and she she brings receipts, she provides the evidence, and actually a lot of this isn't even hidden. The British government has now come out and said that yes, they were using psychological warfare techniques against the population in order to make them do what they want to do. So psychological operations on a population at large scale are hardly new. It's not disputed that these things take place. So basically the argument that I'm going to give you in this episode is a couplefold. I personally believe that technological alien civilizations almost certainly exist, because the universe is an absolutely vast place, and I'll go into some of the numbers around that. But I think the likelihood that any of them are here, knocking over fences in Nevada, or having secret meetings with the government, or whatever else they're doing, or just flying around in Tic Tacs and all the rest of it, I think that is highly unlikely, and I'll give you a chain of evidence for it. Like I say, don't mind if you disagree on any of the particular points. Let's think about this as an exercise of talking through a logical case. So first of all, what's our grounding in alien sightings? There have been many such cases. In recent years, the number of alien sightings, so for example, we have data for the last couple of years where alien sightings are now over about 4,000 a year. It used to be sort of below 3,000 a year, and this is in the US. For whatever reason, most of these sightings tend to occur in the US, whatever reason aliens particularly like the US. Now, if it was the case that potentially what we are seeing is test flights of prototype military hardware, that would go some way to explaining why the majority of them are in the US. The US Navy have released various documentaries at this point. They did one in 2020 called The Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. So by all means, watch that. And of course, the other one they released, which I referred to earlier, is the Tic Tac UFO encounter, which was apparently happened in 2004. Which has been declassified lately. So look, why do I think it's a psyop? Well, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I've got to say my BS detector is firing off on all cylinders on this one. Why do they do it? Well, you don't necessarily need to understand why they're doing it to note that they probably are doing it. But quick speculation as to what might be behind this. Well, potential benefactors would of course include defence contractors through increased funding. It could be governments, as this would be a wonderful justification to push through more centralised control, more defence spending. Of course, defence spending comes with an awful lot of kickbacks. It could be great for technology companies who would like to introduce technologies or policies that would otherwise engender significant pushback. So, I mean, you just think about this in terms of something like lockdowns. If you go to people and say, right, what we want to do is we want to lock you in your homes, and then what we want to do is we want to drive small businesses out of the market while printing a massive amount of money, which turns out to be a huge boon for the rich, and also gives us an opportunity to create vast inflation, which helps reduce the debt pile of the world's governments. It helps us erode away the financial mess that we've got us into. It saves the shadow banking system are you okay with this? As you can imagine, people would probably say no. But if you prefix it with, well, you see, there's going to be an incredibly deadly virus, which probably very few of you are going to survive unless we do these things, well, then all of a sudden, all of those list of demands become so much easier to get over the line. It's probably not wildly different in this case. And I don't think they necessarily are going to do it, but I think that they are keeping their options open, and they are sort of letting this one float near the top to see if it's something that ultimately they want to pull the trigger on. They may never do it, or they may go ahead. So I don't think there's any harm in talking about this. Right, so history of these big sightings. Just skim through these. So the big one, of course, is going to be the Roswell incident in 1947, which was apparently, it spawned a whole load of stuff in popular media. But the idea that these crashed UFOs came down, and bodies of aliens are being kept in Area 51 and all the rest of it. Now, of course, the government then provided a rather flimsy set of narratives around how it was just weather balloons and all the rest of it. Now, I don't think the government are hiding alien bodies, but I think they like to put people in a position where it looks like they're covering up something. They're not actually covering up anything. This is like playing poker and pretending that you've got a pair of aces in your hands. You don't, but you want other people to imagine that you have. I think it's a similar thing to that. The other big one that people talk about is the 1997 Phoenix lights that a lot of people saw. I can't explain what was going on there, but then what exactly happened is also rather confusing, and I'm sure it could be explained in a number of different ways. And I will say that I know people personally. I've never seen anything in the sky which I consider particularly strange, but then I do know people who have experienced these things. I've got a friend who's seen something in the sky a number of times. Now, to be fair, he does live quite near a large military base. So whether that has anything to do with it, I have no idea. But there are people who have a number of times have seen these things. The other thing that's worth touching on is the geographic location of them. Heavy clustering in the US. Strange that. Rest of the world, it does occur in the rest of the world, but to a significantly lesser extent. And the other thing that I just sort of note on this is that the nature of these sightings has changed over time. As that video that I referenced earlier, we started off with more saucer-shaped things. We've moved on then to more cigar-shaped objects, and now they're sort of becoming these spheres, these reasonably large spheres that are able to move in a manner not completely dissimilar to an aircraft, without necessarily any means of doing so, such as highlighted in the NASA examples. So. Yeah, so I mean that's the background. Let's come back to that as to I think it's a science, but let's try and make the case of why I think what's going on here is the case. And my first core argument is that I think that technological civilizations absolutely do exist. It seems very likely to me. I just don't think that they're here. Now, why do I say that? Well, very simply, because the universe is a really, really big place, and it's difficult to get across just how big it is. And I spent a bit of time actually sort of scratching my head and thinking, okay, how can I convey in a way that people can get their heads around the sheer scale of the universe? And I cracked it. I figured it out. So tell me what you think of this, okay? So, how many stars are there in the universe? Well, low estimate, something like 10 to the 29, which is 100 octillion stars out there. So it's a 1 with 29 zeros. That's how many stars there are out there in the universe. In the observable universe, it's something like 10 to the 22. The difference between the observable universe and the whole universe is because the universe is so vast and it's expanding, the bits, the furthest points from us are expanding faster than the speed of light, and therefore we can't see them and we will never see them. But lower bound estimates for the universe as a whole is something around that 100 octillion stars. Now, how big a number is 100 octillion? It's difficult, okay, but think about it in terms of a dollar value, for example. So who's the richest man on earth? Well, it's Elon Musk, and he's got something like $200 billion as his net worth. So how many Elons, if each dollar was a star, how many Elons would you need in order to get out to the total number of stars that exists in the universe? And this is my trick. Okay, so obviously one Elon isn't going to cut it, because 200 billion is absolutely nowhere near 100 octillion. But what about if you made every human on Earth as rich as Elon Musk? Would you now have the same amount of dollars as stars? Well, no, not even close. Okay. What about all mammals, right? Because there are something like 700 billion mammals on the planet. What if you made every single mammal a multi-billionaire as rich as Elon Musk? Would you be close? No, you're absolutely nowhere near. Okay, let's add in birds. Birds, that's another 400 billion individuals. So we're now well over 1 trillion individuals, and we're going to give each of them 200 billion. Absolutely nowhere near yet. Let's add in fish. Now, fish, we're starting to get up some serious numbers here. We're looking at 3.5 trillion individuals, total amount of fish in the sea. And we're going to give each of them Elon Musk's net worth. Are we close yet? No, we are. I tried to do it in terms of percentages, and there were just so many zeros after the decimal place that the number wouldn't mean anything to you anyway. So even if you took all of the humans, all of the mammals, all of the birds, all of the fish, and gave them Elon Musk level wealth, you are still nowhere near. You do, however, get there if you add in insects. And there are a absolutely staggering number of insects on the planet. There are, well, for every classification that I've added so far, so mammals, birds, and fish, for every one of those individuals, there are 250,000 insects. There are something like 10 quintillion insects in the world, which is a lot. Quintillion, that's so after billion you get to trillion, and then you get to quadrillion, then you get to quintillion. So 10 quintillion insects, that's an absolutely vast amount of individuals. If you give every single one of them Elon Musk level wealth, well, finally you're in the octillion range. It is in the same order of magnitude as the number of stars. So the universe is an absolutely incredibly vast place. So for that reason, I think the likelihood of there being alien life out there is incredibly high. And actually, we can quantify it further. So there was a technique which I know Josh has talked about on one of his contemplations where he looked at this, which is the Drake equation. So let's have a look at this. This is going to pop up. Yeah, here we go. So this Drake equation, it's absolutely not definitive, as Drake himself would say. He put it together really quickly, but it's a good rule of thumb for the amount of alien species that are out there. So let's work through an example and see where we get to. And we start off by doing it, just for our galaxy. So the first function that you're seeing there is R, which is how many new stars appear in a galaxy per year. We're going to choose that value to be 1. Because in the Milky Way, you tend to get between 1 and 2 new stars per year. The next function, FP, that is going to be how many planets, how many of those stars have planets. And we're going to pick a value of 0.2 for that. So 1 in 5 stars have planets around them. Of course, in our case, in the example we actually have, which is our own home system, well, 1 out of 1 has planets. And we are finding more and more exoplanets all the time. And it is increasingly looking like you tend to get planets when you get stars. So I'm very, very much lowballing that number there. Like the second function is what number of those planets are in the habitable zone that is suitable for life. This makes the assumption that life requires liquid water, but it might not be the case, but let's go with that. Now, in our star system, we have 3 planets in the habitable zone. And there is good theoretical evidence to suggest that Mars and Venus in the past may have got to the point where they were able to sustain basic life. But being smaller planets than us, they experienced difficulties. Mars got hit by something quite large, and that was the end of that. And Venus went into runaway climate change. Presumably, they didn't. The Venetians at the time, they did not drive as many Teslas as they should have done, or turned off as many light switches, or paid enough tax, or whatever it is that they didn't do, and that is now a complete hellscape. But we have got 3 planets in the habitable zone. But all the same, for this argument that we're going to make here, we are going to put that as just one planet per star system that has planets that's suitable for life. Right. The next function is going to be what percentage of those then go on to develop life of some sort. We're going to pick 10%, although of course in the case of our star system it's a third. Earth did well. Maybe the other two did as well, but that's a bit more speculative. Okay, the second function, now that we've got life, is how many of them go on to develop intelligent life. Some questions around how you answer this one, because you could make the argument that our planet has three main types of intelligent life, being humans, dolphins, and whales. But of course, lacking, opposable thumbs and any means to build a technological society. That's probably not what we're looking for in this Drake equation. But nevertheless, in the one example that we've got, well, yes, I mean, we did go off to develop somewhat intelligent life on this planet. But all the same, we're going to use that as 1% as well to make our case.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.